What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. The Super Bowl is officially over, and that now means that it is the official start of the offseason. And there's no better way to kick off the offseason than me giving you guys my thoughts on all 10 of the new head coaching hires. We have a lot of unproven head coaches taking over teams that have very high expectations. We have some second chance head coaches that look like they have learned from their failures from their first head coaching gigs. And I probably should have put this out a little bit sooner. This is coming out a little bit late, but I wanted to officially wait on the word for Klint Kubiak becoming the Raiders' new head coach. And there's just so many thoughts that I have on these hires. This is a pretty lengthy episode, so go ahead, grab your popcorn, get a snack out the kitchen, or if you're listening to this at work, the past time, or on your way back home. This is going to take a while because there's so many new head coaches. And listen, if you're a diehard football fan like me, you live, eat, breathe, and die football, you have come to the right place. We're talking all things football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. College football, NFL. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. If you don't want the starting quarterback for your favorite team to play like Anthony Richardson this season coming up, give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from. JT Sports is available. You can find us on Apple, Spotify. Links are down in the pinned comment and description down below. Let's dive into it. Klint Kubiak is the final hire of this head coaching carousel. He will be the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Klint Kubiak did a fantastic job his lone season as the Seahawks offensive coordinator, helped Sam Darnold play very efficiently throughout this postseason stretch. Kenneth Walker had a very big performance in the Super Bowl. Klint Kubiak will do right by Fernando Mendoza. Fernando Mendoza is more than likely going to be the guy at number one for the Raiders. Tom Brady was checking him out during the national championship game, had a lot of great things to say about him. Tom Brady and Klint Kubiak aren't going to allow Fernando Mendoza to fail with the Raiders. Tom Brady, playing quarterback at such a high level for so many years in this league, he knows what it takes for a young quarterback to succeed. He knows why young quarterbacks fail in this league. And the majority of times, it's not the quarterback failing the franchise, it's the franchise failing the quarterback. The Raiders already have some very good pieces around Fernando Mendoza. With the hiring of Klint Kubiak, you can definitely expect for Ashton Jeanty to have a very big second season. You saw what Kenneth Walker did in the Super Bowl this season. The Seahawks were third in the NFL in run play percentage. They call it the third highest amount of run plays in the league at 49.71%. Expect for Fernando Mendoza to be heading the football off a lot to Ashton Jeanty. They're not going to put Fernando Mendoza in a situation where he's going to be compromised with a bad offensive line. The offensive line was too bad this season for them not to address it in free agency. That has to be their number one priority, making sure that Fernando Mendoza has some solid protection up front. They have a lot of cap space in free agency, and the Raiders also got to figure out what's going to happen with Max Crosby? I don't think the Raiders have the balls to trade Max Crosby. Max Crosby wants out because he didn't like the fact that they benched him despite him having an injury for the remainder of the season because they wanted to get a draft pick. As he said, F those picks. He's not here to get draft picks. He's here to win games. And if the Raiders aren't serious about trying to win, Max Crosby no longer wants to be a part of this organization. That's going to put a lot of pressure on this front office to really get aggressive come free agency, which I believe that they will. Tom Brady knows that there's a lot on the line for the Raiders considering the current state of this division. And that's what makes this job so tough for Klint Kubiak. Klint Kubiak is going to a Raiders team that has a bunch of holes. You're going to have a young quarterback, and you're in a division with 3 Super Bowl caliber franchises. The Chiefs, we can assume they'll be way better next season than what they were last year. The Broncos and the Chargers are pretty much legitimate Super Bowl contenders right now, and they're only going to get better after this offseason. This is a very tough division for a first-time head coach like Klint Kubiak with a team that has so many roster deficiencies to come in and have success. 3 Hall of Fame coaches is what he's going up against. Established quarterbacks. At least I can see a world where Fernando Mendoza quickly is better than Bo Nix. Bo Nix is solid. Fernando Mendoza, if the Raiders can improve the offensive line, give him some solid receivers, he already has Brock Bowers to throw the football to. I could quickly see Fernando Mendoza establishing himself as a top 12 quarterback in this league. He has a game that translates to early success in the NFL. He's played a bunch of snaps. He's pretty experienced coming in. He has a very high football IQ. You listen to Fernando Mendoza talk football, it's hard not to feel confident that he's going to be able to succeed and find success early as a rookie. I just don't see Klint Kubiak and Tom Brady allowing Fernando Mendoza to fail. I don't know if Klint Kubiak will fail or not, since he's walking into a division that already has so many established teams with very good head coaches. So if you're telling me that Klint Kubiak is going to succeed as the Raiders' new head coach, you're also saying indirectly that either the Broncos, the Chargers, or the Chiefs, one of those 3 teams are going to fall off, because you're not going to have one division with 4 playoff teams in it. Somebody's going to have to regress. Who is that team going to be? When somebody emerges, somebody has to fall off. Could the Broncos be that team? Maybe. Maybe the Chiefs really are done for. Maybe the game has passed Andy Reid by. I don't really know about that, but, you know, the AFC West is a very tough division for a young head coach that's unproven like Klint Kubiak to have success early, especially considering just how many issues the Raiders have right now. The Bills hiring Joe Brady as their new head coach in replace of Sean McDermott is a high-risk, high-reward hiring. The risk is you have an unproven head coach that replaces one of the more consistent coaches in the league. Sean McDermott had a very high floor. You knew even if the Bills had an off season, they at least were going to be good enough to win a playoff game. Joe Brady, the floor is a lot lower. You could bottom out with Joe Brady. You could end up being an 8-9 win team, falling out of Super Bowl contention altogether if things don't work out with him. Yeah, he's a very good offensive mind. He takes over a really good roster, but the AFC is very oversaturated with the amount of teams that have the ability to win it all. You're going to see teams that haven't been in the Super Bowl conversation in the last few years now enter that conversation, like the Jaguars, the Texans, the Chargers. So Joe Brady doesn't have the luxury of, like most first-time head coaches, being able to make some mistakes, learn, because the expectation, despite him being in his first season, is to at least make it to the AFC Championship. You don't fire somebody like Sean McDermott and then lower the expectations just because you have a first-time head coach. That's not how this works. He's expected to elevate the Bills past the level that they've been at for over the last half a decade. I do believe that with Joe Brady hiring Jim Leonhard to be his defensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard is going to get a lot more out of this defense in the postseason than what Sean McDermott was able to get, because Jim Leonhard is a very aggressive defensive play caller. He's a very good defensive mind. I don't know why it's taking Jim Leonhard this long to get a defensive coordinator job. He had some phenomenal defenses at Wisconsin. Hiring Jim Leonhard is going to be one of those moves that nobody really talks about until you see the impact that it's going to have on the Bills defense in the postseason. This is why Joe Brady has a very high ceiling, a higher ceiling than what Sean McDermott had. Sean McDermott didn't really know that much about offense. He specialized on the defensive side of the football. And the biggest issue that the Bills had in the playoffs was that their defense couldn't come through for Josh Allen in crunch moments. Obviously, we remember 13 seconds. We saw how they lost to the Bills. In spite of the turnovers, you still would have thought that the defense could bail out Josh Allen despite the mistakes that he had. Jim Leonhard could possibly take the Bills defense to a top 5 level and position himself to eventually become a head coach. I think that highly of Jim Leonhard. I think that Jim Leonhard has so much expertise on this side of the ball that I don't really see a drop-off happening at all. And if this Joe Brady hire does end up paying off, Jim Leonhard is going to be a major part of that. Obviously, the biggest need for the Bills is adding some more receivers. You could get Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson coming out of this draft. There should be some pretty solid options in free agency. I also think that the hiring of Joe Brady puts a lot of pressure on the Bills general manager, because basically what the Bills GM, Brandon Beane, and the owner are saying is that Sean McDermott was holding back this team. This team has enough talent to win a Super Bowl. So by saying that, if this team doesn't improve this year, then Brandon Beane might end up getting the boot. Because if you add some good receivers around Josh Allen, I don't think the Bills have too many weaknesses. And obviously, they could be a lot more better in certain spots on defense as far as their pass rush goes, finding some better corners. But this team isn't really that far away from having a stacked team. So when you have this kind of situation where the expectations are so high, there's not a lot of leniency, there's not going to be a lot of patience. And from listening to the Bills owner talk for the first time in my life, it doesn't seem like this guy makes a lot of rational decisions. So if the Bills lose in the wild card round, they lose in the second round, I could see him saying, hey, you told me that, Sean McDermott was the problem, and I was expecting us to win it all, and we're still getting the same results, so you probably should go too. I like the hiring of Joe Brady, but the risk definitely is a lot high. The reward is a lot higher than what the risk is. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. The Falcons hiring Kevin Stefanski is disappointing, but it's not bad. You would have obviously loved to have came away with John Harbaugh, who is the best head coaching candidate available this coaching carousel, since he would have brought Super Bowl winning experience. He's a proven head coach, a future Hall of Famer. You would have been a lot more confident in this team's ability to win with John Harbaugh, since he will have such a significant advantage over the rest of the head coaches in this division. Kevin Stefanski, though, at least you're getting somebody that knows offense, has a somewhat respectable track record. This is the best head coach the Browns have had since my lifetime, since me and a lot of you all were born. The Browns haven't had a head coach that's been able to get to the playoffs multiple times with several different quarterbacks and bring them somewhat of a period of stability. The Falcons already have a playoff caliber football team. It just comes down to, can Kevin Stefanski get the most out of Michael Penix? Michael Penix, if he isn't good at all and he can't play, what's the insurance plan? Do you bring back Kirk Cousins despite cutting him, since him and Kevin Stefanski already have some familiarity dating back to their time in Minnesota? Do you trade for Mac Jones? The Falcons are a quarterback away from being a Sherlock in the playoffs. Michael Penix, if he can hoop, I'm pretty confident that they win this division. Kevin Stefanski is the best head coach in the NFC South right now. You're not taking Dave Canales over him. This guy won Coach of the Year twice, and he went to the playoffs with Joe Flacco. Kellen Moore and Tyler Shuck showed a lot of promise last season. They still got a lot to prove, and their roster isn't really that good. The Buccaneers, they're going to be looking for a new head coach next offseason. They're just trying to delay the inevitable since they prematurely extended Todd Bowles. The opportunity is there for Kevin Stefanski to hit the ground running in his first season in Atlanta. The defense is already pretty good despite the chaos surrounding James Pierce Jr. right now. This is one of the better young talented defenses in the league. They had a very good drive last year where they hit on a lot of rookies on the defensive side of the ball. Billy Bowman, Xavier Watts. They also have Jalen Walker, who they drafted from Georgia before they got JPJ. So the Falcons, from a talent standpoint, they're already right there. And the Falcons, I would argue and say that they were a better situation than Kevin Stefanski staying in Cleveland was. Kevin Stefanski probably said to the Browns, just go ahead and fire me, let me go. I know I'm going to get another job, so let me just see if I can find a better situation. The Falcons have the talent in place. There's a few pieces they need to add on the offensive line, but with how weak the division is, I think Kevin Stefanski can be successful in Atlanta. I think that if he can make the playoffs with Joe Flacco, he has some success early with Baker Mayfield, I think it's possible that he can get Michael Penix right. And if not, he can bring in another quarterback that can get the job done. With how bad the quarterback position got in Cleveland when they traded for Diddy Watson, I doubt that Kevin Stefanski is going to allow the Falcons quarterback situation to be in so much disarray to where he loses a second job the same way that he lost the last one. I believe that the Browns GM, Andrew Berry, kind of compromised him with how he just couldn't get the offensive line right, how him and the owner really wanted Deshaun, and Deshaun just fell off a cliff out of nowhere. Deshaun Watson had the most random downfall in the history of sports. When he got traded to Cleveland, he was essentially viewed as a top 7 or better quarterback. He was an MVP caliber quarterback. For him to go from that to just a complete bum, a scrub, just can't play, very shocking, very random. We've never seen a downfall like that. And even if Kevin Stefanski can't find a good quarterback with the Falcons, or he can't get Michael Penix right, the quarterback play can't get any worse than what he had to deal with in Cleveland. Bijan Robinson is going to produce monster numbers under Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski, we know this dude loves to run the football. He's going to be a lot more creative with utilizing Bijan Robinson's talents more than what the Falcons' previous play caller was in Zach Robinson. You're not going to see Bijan Robinson being used as a decoy when he lines up at receiver. You're definitely not going to see a backup running back stealing touchdowns away from Bijan Robinson on the goal line under Kevin Stefanski's watch. I like the hire of Kevin Stefanski. It's not one that I'm extremely high on. I mainly just like the hire since this is a coach that could take advantage of the weakest coaching division in the NFL that already is inheriting a playoff caliber team. So I like the odds of Kevin Stefanski finding success with the Falcons. The Arizona Cardinals were the worst head coaching opening available this offseason. Somebody had to take this job. Mike LaFleur is the poor soul that will be the Arizona Cardinals' new head coach. For one, he's already at a huge disadvantage because he's entering a complete war right now in the NFC West. He's going to be going up against 3 of the 5 best coaches in the NFL. 2 of them have won Super Bowls, and Sean McVay, and just recently Mike McDonald, alongside of Kyle Shanahan, who's already been to 2. You got 3 of the best head coaches in the NFL that you got to go up against, alongside of them having 3 Super Bowl caliber teams. The Cardinals roster, surprisingly, isn't as bad as what you may think. There are some good players on this team, especially on offense. You got Trey McBride, debatably the best tight end in the NFL right now if we're just solely going off production. You got Michael Wilson, who is going off in replace of MXJ when he was missing out with some injuries. MXJ, Marvin Harrison Jr., he has shown some flashes. The defense has a few solid players. Walter Nolan, Will Johnson were pretty solid as rookies last year when they were on the field. You still got Budda Baker. There's some solid players on this Cardinal squad. The biggest question for Mike LaFleur is who's going to be playing quarterback for you. It's assumed that Kyler Murray is going to be out of Arizona. I don't know about that. I can't see the Cardinals being forced to move on from Kyler Murray just because, for one, even if you are willing to trade Kyler Murray, there's not a market for Kyler Murray right now. Nobody wants to trade for an inconsistent, injury-prone quarterback, for one. 2, Kyler Murray has a $52 million cap hit this year. And even if the Cardinals are willing to take a chunk of that to get rid of Kyler Murray to trade him, you're not going to get fair value for him. And 3, there's not a lot of definitive upgrades over Kyler Murray that are going to be available in the draft and free agency. So it's kind of a situation where you can't really find better. So you just got to hold on to him until better options come available next offseason. And unless you're just willing to just take the L and just try to overcome such a big cap hit like what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson, what the Dolphins could do with Tua, you're kind of just forced to keep going with Kyler Murray if you're Mike LaFleur. And listen, Mike LaFleur is an offensive-minded coach. If there's anybody who could get the most out of Kyler Murray, it should be this guy. He comes from the McVay coaching tree. McVay normally produces some really good offensive-minded coaches. Zach Taylor has had some pretty good success with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Kevin O'Connell, also a Sean McVay disciple, has had a lot of success with the Vikings. The huge concern I have with Mike LaFleur is he didn't call plays as the Rams OC. And 2, the last time he was calling plays, he was the OC of the New York Jets, and the offense was completely terrible. He had Zach Wilson as his quarterback, so that kind of handicapped him, but he was hired to help develop Zach Wilson. Has Mike LaFleur washed off the suck from the New York Jets? Because the Arizona Cardinals right now, you're in a division that has 3 perennial Super Bowl contending teams with 3 of the best coaches in the league. You don't really have a lot of star power to compete with those guys, nor are you going to have a lot of money to really bluster this team. And even if you are willing to get aggressive in free agency, you got to overpay guys that want to come to Arizona. Arizona is consistently one of the lowest graded franchises in terms of how they treat their players, their facilities. They have one of the worst owners in sports. I don't see Mike LaFleur working out as the Cardinals head coach. You're asking a guy that has no experience as a head coach, also has an unproven track record as a play caller, to come into an absolute war that is the NFC West and find a way to be successful in Arizona against this kind of head coaching competition, this kind of firepower that he's going to be going up against teams that are already built to go the distance. All I can say to Mike LaFleur, all I can really say about this hire is good luck, because he's going to need a lot of it. On the paper, the Giants hiring John Harbaugh looks like the best hire of this offseason. He's inheriting a roster that has a lot of fun young players, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Jackson Dart, how big of a leap can he take in year 2 under John Harbaugh is going to have a big impact on determining how much success Harbs can have in his first season in the Big Apple. Cam Scatterboo, Malik Neighbors, we know how good they are when they're on the field. They're going to come back fully healthy. If the Giants can beef up that offensive line a little bit more, add a few receivers, they're going to have a very stacked offense. I'm very alarmed with John Harbaugh's hiring of Matt Nagy as his offensive coordinator. Matt Nagy doesn't have a good track record as a play caller. He didn't really do much when he was on the Chiefs staff. Andy Reid disciples as of recently haven't really turned into anything special, and normally they're just beneficiaries of Andy Reid's great coaching and Patrick Mahomes. When you have these offensive coordinators that call plays for some of the best quarterbacks in the league, you got to attribute some of their success mostly to just the greatness of the quarterback. It's hard to be a bad offensive coordinator if you're coaching Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, since these quarterbacks are so good to where they can turn a bad play into a great play. If you have an offensive coordinator like a Klint Kubiak, though, that's hooping with Sam Darnold, then there's a lot more legitimacy that he has, since he was able to succeed with the quarterback that isn't as good as guys like Lamar, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow, Mahomes. So you have a lot more confidence and belief in his ability as a play caller than what you do in a guy in Matt Nagy, who we've already seen flame out once as a play caller when he was calling plays with the Bears, with Mitchell Trubisky. That didn't really work out. You have a quarterback in Jackson Dart that primarily was succeeding due to being in Brian Daboll's scheme. Despite Brian Daboll not being a good head coach, one thing you can't deny is this dude knew offense. With him losing that and being in a new system with a guy that isn't as good as a play caller as what Brian Daboll was, I have some very alarming concerns about Jackson Dart's development under Matt Nagy. I like Jackson Dart. I just don't like who his play caller is. And a quarterback's second season in the league is one of the most important when it comes to their development. Year 2 is normally when you either see the ascension, the guy prove that he's the franchise quarterback, or where you start to have concerns about if you drafted the right guy or not. So when you hire Matt Nagy and the most important year of a young quarterback's development, there's a lot of risk involved with this hire. I think that the floor is very low and the ceiling isn't really that high either. I do like what John Harbaugh has assembled as far as his defensive staff goes. He hires the former defensive coordinator of the Dolphins. Their defense was solid considering the personnel they had to work with. They already have one of the better defensive lines in the league. Brian Burns was one of the best pass rushers this season that nobody talked about. Abdul Carter, I don't think he's a bust. He will take a big leap. You pretty oftentimes see edge rushers come into the league and pop off in year 2, year 3, despite having unproductive rookie years. Abdul Carter, I think that he just has too much potential, too much sheer athleticism to not pan out, especially under John Harbaugh. I think John Harbaugh is going to get a lot out of Abdul Carter. I think the biggest issue that the Giants have defensively is you got a very bad secondary. They need a lot of help at corner. They need a lot of help in the back end of that secondary. Also, linebacker could use a little bit of tweaking. John Harbaugh, from a name recognition standpoint, is the best head coach in the NFC East. There's no guarantee that he will make the playoffs, though, in his first season coaching the Giants, simply due to, one, the hiring of Matt Nagy, very alarming. 2, the Giants have a lot of holes on defense that they have to address, along with the offensive line. And with John Harbaugh, maybe the game has passed him by. Maybe he has fallen a little bit out of touch with it. We'll see. I believe that this hire does work out, though. John Harbaugh, he's the best head coach in this division. If the Eagles had to choose between Nick Sirianni and John Harbaugh, they probably take John Harbaugh. If the Commanders fire Dan Quinn today, they would want John Harbaugh. Same thing with the Cowboys. But I love the hire. It was the best hire that anybody could have made, since you don't have guys like John Harbaugh available very often. Already a proven winner, Super Bowl pedigree, one of the better culture builders that the NFL has seen. I just don't like the hire of Matt Nagy. I'm shocked that the Tennessee Titans were able to hire Robert Saleh. With how many head coaches and general managers they've ran through over these last couple of years since firing Mike Vrabel, their owner has some very big question marks surrounding her as far as her leadership, her ability to stabilize this organization. So getting a guy like Robert Saleh, who already was a head coach in a dysfunctional situation before with the Jets, deciding to take over another dysfunctional organization, kind of surprised me, since he probably could have gotten better jobs offered to him. I thought that it was going to be a sure thing that he would be the Ravens head coach, or he would be coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers, franchises that have way more stability than what the Titans have. But I'm not mad at it. I'm just shocked, since Robert Saleh is such a great candidate and the Titans have been down for a few years now. I thought that he would have taken over a much better, a more stable organization. I am confident he can succeed with the Titans, though, which is why I'm shocked, because I believe he's going to work. You only wonder if he was going to get the offensive coordinator right, since that was what his demise was with the Jets. Despite having Aaron Rodgers, the offense still wasn't good enough. Well, Robert Saleh hires Brian Daboll to be his offensive coordinator, and you pair him up with Cam Ward. The Tennessee Titans, with the amount of cap space they're going to have, and they already have a history of being willing to spend aggressively in free agency. They went after Calvin Ridley. They made a trade for that corner from the Kansas City Chiefs. So this is an organization that has no problem opening up the wallet, cutting those checks. Brian Daboll with Cam Ward, with the improved receiving core, a better offensive line, you could see him have the same kind of season we just saw out of Caleb Williams. If you watch Cam Ward during his final month, he played his best football. He got better seemingly every game that he played. He ended this season off with 8 touchdowns, only 2 turnovers. He had some very good games against some of the better defenses in the NFL this year, which was even more surprising, since the talent he had to work with wasn't really that good. Calvin Ridley couldn't stay healthy. He was relying on elite Ironmaner and a lot of young receivers. The offensive line was allowing him to just get blitzed like crazy. Robert Saleh in the AFC South right now, with the current state of this division, you got a little bit of catching up to do with the Texans, who are offensive line away from being Super Bowl contenders. The Jaguars, you will have to assume that they probably make a few more moves roster-wise to put themselves in position to have a title of maybe being Super Bowl contenders. Also, the Tennessee Titans, though, with how much potential Cam Ward has, and you pairing him with one of the better offensive play callers in Brian Daboll, one of the better quarterback developers in the league, the chances of the Titans being a playoff team year one under Robert Saleh are very high. You know they're going to spend on defense. They're going to drive very well on that side of the ball. Robert Saleh got a lot out of a 49ers defense last season that was just so ramsacked with injuries. You were always asking yourself, how is he able to do this? How is he able to coach up a defense that was good enough to get the 49ers to the second round of the playoffs, losing not just their two best players on defense, but two of the best players at their respective position. Fred Warner, the best linebacker in the NFL. Nick Bosa, one of the best pass rushers in the league. And that defense was still pretty good. With Robert Saleh, the Tennessee Titans have a lot of potential entering this upcoming season, especially with Cam Ward being paired up with Brian Daboll. I like the Titans' chances of being able to go from the worst team in the division to maybe the best team in the division. The Mike McCarthy hire is getting too much hate. The Steelers chose to go with the safe option versus the risky option. You could have went with a young, unproven guy like Chris Shula with the Rams. Maybe you could have rolled the dice on Brian Flores, who has experience, but not a lot of proven success as a head coach. With Mike McCarthy, you get somebody that, with the same thing with Mike Tomlin, has a high floor, but assumed low or average ceiling. And I think that's the biggest misconception about the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy in replace of Mike Tomlin. Mike McCarthy is a better coach than what Mike Tomlin is as far as the X's and O's go and his game day coaching. Mike Tomlin is one of the best motivators in NFL history. There's not too many head coaches that have come through this league that have been able to get more with less than what Mike Tomlin has been able to do as far as the quarterback position has gone. But that's the thing that has plagued Mike Tomlin. He's a good motivator. He's good at being able to elevate average situations, but he was the reason why he was in those average situations to begin with how he was unable to hire a good coaching staff, which held him back. Being a CEO coach, you're only as good as what your coordinators are. Terrell Austin, Arthur Smith, one of the worst coordinator duos in the league. Tomlin has been able to do more with less in Pittsburgh because he's given himself less. Mike McCarthy already has hired a very good defensive coordinator in Patrick Graham, who could squeeze more juice out of this defense than what Mike Tomlin was able to squeeze out of it. Mike Tomlin, despite being a defensive-minded coach, the Steelers' defense was always one of the glaring issues. This was a defense that had a lot invested into it last year and was slightly above average at best. And in the playoffs, anytime the Steelers have gone up against an MVP-level quarterback, the defense was a no-show. With Mike McCarthy's ability to assemble a good coaching staff, along with specializing in the area that has held the Steelers back the most over these last 5 seasons, the ceiling is a lot higher as far as what we could see the Steelers do in the postseason with Mike McCarthy compared to Mike Tomlin. Mike McCarthy hasn't gone a decade without a playoff win. He won a playoff game a few years ago with the Cowboys. Mike McCarthy was held back in Dallas because of Jerry Jones. What other head coaches have had success with the Cowboys in recent history? The last time there's been a head coach that's won the Super Bowl in Dallas, you didn't even have HD TV. You couldn't even watch the Super Bowl in 4K. Jerry Jones is the biggest control freak in the NFL as far as owners go. Mike McCarthy, I felt he did a pretty damn good job with Dallas, considering the control freak that Jerry Jones is. His just need to always get the credit, always being an attention seeker, always being a constant distraction. You look at Mike McCarthy's time in Dallas and you believe that he underachieved. I'll say he overachieved, since Brian Schottenheimer had a pretty good team this year. And look what happened to the Cowboys this season without Mike McCarthy. They missed the playoffs altogether. At least Mike McCarthy had a few years when the Cowboys won double-digit games. They made a little bit of noise in the playoffs. He didn't have the best owner as far as allowing him to run the team went. He had some solid rosters, couldn't get the most out of them, but I don't put that on Mike McCarthy. I put a lot of the Cowboys' shortcomings on Jerry Jones, since they've been coming up short in the playoffs for decades now. With the Steelers' ownership being less controlling, allowing their head coach to assemble the staff they want, have a little bit of say in personnel decisions, Mike McCarthy is going to be a lot better with the Steelers, since he doesn't have to worry about Jerry Jones, the control freak, hanging over him, always having his hands on the cooking jar. And that's what I think most people are overlooking about the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy. He wasn't a failure in Dallas because he was a bad coach. He didn't succeed in Dallas because Jerry Jones didn't allow him to. Mike McCarthy is one of those coaches where if you allow him to cook, he'll cook. And he's a Pittsburgh native. He bleeds the black and gold. If you cut him open, you examine his blood, it's going to be black and gold. And he has a lot emotionally invested into this franchise. He grew up admiring this organization from afar. So I like the hire of Mike McCarthy. He easily is the best head coach in the AFC North right now as far as credibility and resume goes. A former Super Bowl champion, a consistent track record of winning everywhere that he's been. Can he get quarterback right? If Aaron Rodgers comes back, Mike McCarthy and him can make another postseason run if the Steelers add some more receivers. That's the only thing that this offense is really lacking. And if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back, if you want to run it one season with Will Howard, you don't really have anything to lose. If Will Howard's good, then cool. You got a franchise quarterback. You should be able to have a lot more postseason success. And if Will Howard's bad, then you're in position to come away with one of the top quarterbacks in what's going to be one of the more loaded quarterback classes that we've seen in recent memory as far as the 2026 quarterback class goes. I don't have anything against the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy. I believe he has a higher ceiling than what Mike Tomlin did. The Steelers have a better chance at winning a Super Bowl with Mike McCarthy as the head coach than what they did with Mike Tomlin, since Mike McCarthy understands offense. Mike Tomlin was Stevie Wonder when it came to offense. Mike McCarthy can get a lot out of the quarterback position with what he did with Dak Prescott, having his best seasons under Mike McCarthy's tutelage, and also him having the ability to assemble a way better staff versus Mike Tomlin, who just hired his friends and family and guys who just ran this old school offense with outdated schemes, outdated systems. Mike McCarthy is going to be a lot better than what a lot of people think in Pittsburgh. The Ravens regret not taking the risk on Mike Macdonald when they could have hired him and fired John Harbaugh a few years ago. The hiring of Jesse Mentor proves this. Jesse Mentor is essentially the Ravens hoping that this is Mike Macdonald 2.0. He comes from the Harbaugh coaching tree like Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald initially was under John Harbaugh at Michigan as his defensive coordinator. Then him and his brother essentially did somewhat of a trade. Jim Harbaugh got Jesse Mentor. John Harbaugh got Mike Macdonald. And those two moves worked out for both parties. Jesse Mentor helped Michigan win a national championship, had a lot of success calling plays on the defense as the Chargers DC. And Mike Macdonald, as we already know, helped the Ravens make it to the AFC Championship, is a new Super Bowl champion. The Ravens are bringing in somebody that already has familiarity with the organization, the franchise. He specializes on the defensive side of the ball, so the Ravens still somewhat keep their identity of physicality. When the Ravens have been at their best, it's never been because of the quarterback. Lamar Jackson, as great as what he is, he's came up short in the postseason because he hasn't been able to play as good as what he does in a regular season with the amount of pressure that he's had on his shoulders in these playoff games. With defensive-minded coaches, they don't put all of the burden on their quarterback to win the game. They normally emphasize playing complementary football. If Mike Macdonald, he wasn't winning because slinging Sammy D was throwing for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns every game, putting on the cape. They won because they only asked Sam Darnold to step up when need be. They gave him a good run game and a phenomenal defense. That's how the Ravens are going to get Lamar Jackson his first Super Bowl. It's not going to be, hey, Lamar, go in the closet and put on your Superman cape. It's going to be, hey, Lamar, in the fourth quarter, we want you to hand the football off to Derrick Henry 15 times to win the game. We're going to ask our defense to play outstanding in crucial moments, and we're only going to need you to be Superman throughout 6-7 moments throughout the game. Lamar Jackson doesn't need to be Superman for the Ravens to win a Super Bowl. He just needs for the rest of the team not to fall apart around him like how it has in the last few years in the postseason. Now, you can say, well, Lamar Jackson turns the football over a lot in the playoffs. If you have a great defense, they can bail out your quarterback if he has a few mistakes. The Texans could have been in the Super Bowl in spite of C.J. Stroud having about 1 million turnovers. So if you have a great defense, you can afford a few mistakes. But if you have a defensive-minded coach, his philosophy already isn't even going to put a quarterback in that situation to where he has a bunch of turnovers. Lamar Jackson, is better to ask him to do less so you can maximize his efficiency than asking him to do more, and you just put too much of a mental burden on Lamar. I think another issue with Lamar Jackson's postseason struggles is just he overthinks it mentally. He doesn't run the football as much. He just is a little bit more indecisive than what you normally see him be in the playoffs. He holds on to the ball a lot longer. I think a lot of that comes from the mentality that Lamar feels that he has to put on the cape. And Jesse Mentor, he has to tell Lamar, keep the cape in the closet if the Ravens are going to get over the hump. The pressure is a lot because when you take over a team like Baltimore that has such a out-of-this-world talent at quarterback with a roster that already is so good, if you struggle, you're not going to have a lot of patience nor a lot of leniency. You're not going to be able to learn on the job. Even Mike Macdonald had a few mistakes that he was able to shake back from. He went 10-6 in his 10-7 in his first season. He whiffed on his offensive coordinator hire, had to get the quarterback right, but he wasn't getting crucified like how if he would have went 10-7 his first season with the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. With Lamar Jackson and the talent that this team has on it, you add to the expectation for Jesse Mentor to have success early, and you expect instant gratification if you're Eric DeCosta a Ravens fan, the Ravens owner, since this team is already built to win. And that's the downside of hiring an unproven young coach that inherits such a great situation. Yes, it's a lot easier to succeed, but the pressure gets to be so much to where if you don't meet certain expectations in the playoffs, you're not going to be allowed to learn, because you only have about 3 years to have success with an organization like the Ravens or the Bills or anybody that feels like they already have a roster good enough to compete. You only get about 2 years. So if you don't get to the playoffs in your first season being Jesse Minter, and you miss the playoffs again year 2, or you end up being an early first round exit, or you lose in the second round, then you start having the question brought up if we hired the right guy or not. And you don't get a lot of patience when you're with organizations like the Ravens. The NFL is the abbreviation for not for long. So Jesse Minter doesn't have success early. The Ravens, they're going to start having some concerns. And also, the thing that makes the Ravens hiring Jesse Minter so interesting is how he's constantly going to be compared to Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald is always going to be viewed as the one who got away from the Ravens. So there's always going to be constant comparison of Mike Macdonald's performance compared to Jesse Minter, since you didn't take the gamble on Mike Macdonald a few years ago when you could have. And you getting Jesse Minter is kind of you just trying to chase the ghost of Mike Macdonald, since he has a lot of similarities to him, comes from the same coaching tree, runs a similar scheme. But there can only be one Mike Macdonald. If Jesse Minter is at least 80% of what Mike Macdonald is, you got a chance to win the Super Bowl. But you also have a high chance of striking out trying to find the next Mike Macdonald. A lot of common reasons for why you see teams flame out in the NFL is because they try to follow trends. And when you follow trends, the downside is trying to be trendy ends up putting you in very sucky situations, since you end up hiring head coaches that are influenced from certain head coaches' schemes. You try to get their disciples because you want to replicate what that head coach did that has success. But some of these head coaches may not be able to replicate it as well. It's like you have the Great Value brand Fruit Loops versus the organic real Fruit Loops. The real Fruit Loops taste better than the Great Value brand Fruit Loops. And sometimes when you value shop, you don't get as good results when you could have had the original thing. So that's always the thing with the NFL. It's a copycat league, but when you try to hire so many copycats, you just end up exposing yourself, because you end up getting somebody that's nowhere close. You get somebody that's unoriginal. And I really believe that with the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, Mike Macdonald does nothing but put a lot more pressure and increase the expectation for Jesse Minter in year 1 in Baltimore. The Browns coaching search was a disaster. They put their candidates through a lot of various different tests to try to figure out how well they would fit as their new head coach. They had them taking personality tests, all kinds of odd things. And the majority of the organization was settled on promoting Jim Schwartz from defensive coordinator to their head coach. And in spite of the majority within the Browns organization wanting to move forward with promoting Jim Schwartz, the owner decided to go with Todd Monken instead. Now, Todd Monken is a very odd hire for the Browns, since he wasn't really seen as a highly sought after head coaching candidate. He's gotten a few head coaching looks over the last couple of years. He does have experience coaching in the NFL and having success. He called plays a little bit when he was with Jameis Winston in Tampa. He had a little bit of time with the Browns in the past. He had a lot of success as Georgia's offensive coordinator, won back-to-back national championships with a walk-on quarterback in Stetson Bennett. And he did a pretty good job calling plays for the Baltimore Ravens. He took Lamar Jackson's game to a completely different level. He took Lamar Jackson, who already was an MVP before Todd Monken got there, and then took Lamar Jackson up 5 notches. And now you see Lamar Jackson looking a lot more like Aaron Rodgers than he does Michael Vick, since he has a level of efficiency that we haven't really seen since Aaron Rodgers as far as throwing the football goes, when Lamar Jackson threw for 40 touchdowns, only had like 4 or 5 interceptions 2 seasons ago, won another MVP award with Todd Monken. Todd Monken understands offense. He knows what he's doing on this side of the football. If the Browns can get the offensive line right, there's a chance that Todd Monken could be a shockingly pretty good hire for the Browns. The reason why I don't believe that this is going to work, for one, when you have this kind of disalignment as far as your organization wanting one guy, preferring to hire one guy, and the owner just doing his own thing, hiring somebody else, it normally doesn't work out. Because with a lot of decisions that haven't worked out with the Browns, the common denominator has been Jimmy Haslam. When you have the most dysfunctional owner in the NFL, you can't expect any head coaching hire to work out. It's a wonder that Kevin Stefanski even worked out. Kevin Stefanski, despite Browns fans wanting him gone, whether you want to admit it or not, the dude was the most successful head coach probably in the history of your franchise over the last 2 decades. He's led you to more playoff appearances, more winning seasons than anybody else throughout my lifetime watching the Browns. And he gave you stability in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL when you're going up against Zach Taylor, who went to the Super Bowl with Joe Burrow, 2 AFC championships, Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, 2 future Hall of Fame coaches. You can definitely do a lot worse than Kevin Stefanski. And with their quarterback situation right now, look, Todd Monken wants to work with Shedeur Sanders. That's all fine and dandy. Is he going to be allowed to start Shedeur Sanders next season over Deshaun Watson possibly? Because it's easy to assume that Shedeur is going to be the starter next year when Deshaun Watson will be cleared to play. And the Browns did give this dude $250 million fully guaranteed. I strongly doubt that Jimmy Haslam is going to want to take the L with Deshaun Watson. He's still going to want to try to see if he can get the most out of his investments, as he should. Because if I give a guy $250 million fully guaranteed, yeah, Shedeur had a few flashes. He made it to the Pro Bowl, which may not mean much to most of you all. But if I'm giving a guy this much money, yeah, I'm not about to let this dude just walk out on me and me not try to give him one more shot to prove that he was worthy of getting that money. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense for the Browns to start Deshaun Watson over Shedeur Sanders next season. It's a political decision. Yeah, it's a decision that isn't going to be performance-based. It's financially motivated. But again, if I'm giving you $250 million fully guaranteed, you're damn right I'm about to give you every single opportunity to try to prove yourself again. So it makes a lot of sense for Todd Monken to probably be forced to have to start Deshaun Watson against his wishes in favor of trying to get the most out of that awful contract. And Shedeur Sanders, he's not no proven thing either. The dude had 7 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and a very bad QBR. And I love Shedeur Sanders. He had some good moments, but he also had a lot of bad moments also, some really bad decisions. And there were a good amount of quarterbacks that were pursuing to be better than Shedeur Sanders. There were a bunch of quarterbacks that were rookies last season that were drafted over Shedeur Sanders that Shedeur was presumed to be better than, that actually ended up being better than Shedeur Sanders. Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, all were believed by most to not be better than Shedeur Sanders. And they've had more production than what Shedeur Sanders has had in both ample amount of playing time, same amount of opportunities given. And I know that the Browns aren't a great situation, but neither are the New York Giants. Neither are the New Orleans Saints. And both Jackson Dart and Tyler Shough had a lot more success than what Shedeur Sanders had. The Saints were projected to have the first overall pick before this season started. So there's no guarantee that Shedeur Sanders is going to be some proven thing at quarterback. Now, I still believe that Shedeur can be a solid quarterback in this league, but if you're Todd Monken, are you really going to want to tie your job security to Shedeur Sanders, knowing how impatient the Browns organization is? I don't know. The Browns have some good pieces. It's not like they don't have some talent on this roster. They got some solid receivers. Jerry Jeudy, often scrutinized. He's not bad. He's average. He's a solid wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. You do have Isaiah Bond, who probably would have been a second-round pick if it wasn't for the legal situation that he was tied up in. Harold Fannin, Quinshon Judkins were beasting and feasting as rookies last year. We know the defense has a lot of good players on it. You got the reigning defensive rookie of the year. You got Myles Garrett, who broke the all-time sack record, Denzel Ward. There's a few pieces there. Who is Todd Monken going to hire to replace Jim Schwartz if he doesn't come back? We'll see. I don't hate Todd Monken as a head coach. I just hate that Todd Monken got his first opportunity as a head coach in the NFL with the worst organization in the league. The Browns just have too much dysfunction in the front office, from the GM, from the ownership, a shitty quarterback situation. You would hate to be a guy like Todd Monken that just was hired because you were low-hanging fruit. Todd Monken got this job because none of the top candidates even wanted to interview with the Browns. Mike McDaniel declined an interview with Cleveland. He'd rather be an offensive coordinator than try to be a head coach again because he knew how bad of a situation this was. The majority of the top candidates that were available this coaching cycle had no interest in even taking a phone call with the Browns. So that tells you everything that you need to know about this organization, this situation, the dysfunction that has surrounded this franchise for so many years, surrounding Jimmy Haslam. I just don't see this working out, not more so because of Todd Monken, but just because of the situation just being too bad to even find any silver lining and to have any chance of success. Jeff Hafley is a solid hire for the Dolphins considering the current state of their franchise. He's not a first-time head coach as far as having no experience being a head coach at all. He, a few years ago, was a college football head coach for Boston College, had a moderate amount of success, said that the current state of college football just was too much for him. He came to the NFL as a defensive coordinator for the Packers, and he produced the best defenses that the Packers have had in 15 years. The Dolphins aren't getting the guy that is some rando that they couldn't do no better. This is a guy in Jeff Hafley that is a really good defensive mind. He got a lot out of that Packers defense despite the amount of injuries that they had to overcome on that side of football over the last couple of years. The Dolphins aren't expecting to have any success anytime soon. They know that this is going to be a pretty lengthy rebuild considering how challenging your salary cap situation is going to be depending on what you do with Tua. It's assumed that they end up just taking the L like how the Broncos did with Russell Wilson. They eat that big dead cap hit and they just try to rebuild quietly through the draft. You won't be able to sign a lot of big name free agency, so you have to try to see if you can hit on a few good value finds, like how the Eagles were able to do when they signed Zach Bond, who was a career special teamer turned all-pro. And also, if you do move on from Tua, how are you going to address the quarterback situation? Are you going to unite Malik Willis with Jeff Hafley. Jeff Hafley already has ties to Malik Willis, since Malik Willis had to start a few games and replace Jordan Love over these last few years, and he's played outstanding. I think that Malik Willis could be a better version of what Tyrod Taylor was. Tyrod Taylor was the backup for a few years for the Ravens, had a few moments when he stepped up, had a few productive years starting for the Buffalo Bills. He's been like a journeyman backup, a bridge quarterback for the majority of his time being a starter. But Malik Willis, though, with the situation that the Dolphins are in, the expectations aren't going to be that high. He's going to have at least a year or two to grow and make some mistakes. And the Dolphins, with their roster not having a lot of high-end players, you only really have about 4 or 5, A-Chain, Jalen Waddle, Bradley Chubb, Zach Seiler. What's going to happen with Tyreek Hill? You're going to at least need 3 years for Jeff Hafley to even have a shot at being properly assessed, since this is the most challenging situation that any head coach has to walk into outside of Mike LaFleur, walking into a division that has 3 of the best head coaches in it, along with going up against 3 Super Bowl caliber teams. Now, the bright side is that with the expectations being so low as what they are, if you just exceed them just a little bit, you're going to be given a pretty wide leash. Like, look at what Kellen Moore just did with the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints were projected to be the worst team in the NFL this past season, get the first overall pick, and it ended up being a lot more competitive than expected. So you're a lot higher on the trajectory of the Saints than what you were around this same time last year, given their cap situation. And they were in a similar situation that the Dolphins find themselves currently in right now. They just weren't as asked out as bad as what the Dolphins are, as far as the impact that their bad decision extending Tua is going to have on them. If the Dolphins can win at least like 5 or 6 games next season, that's an accomplishment. You are in a rebuild that's going to take very long to start seeing the fruits of it. And I think that for Jeff Hafley, considering that the expectations are low, this is a pretty good job for him. I don't like the situation, but the expectations aren't going to be high. There's going to be a lot of patience, considering that everybody knows that extending Tua was a mistake, and it's going to take a while to be able to make up for that. So he's going to have time to learn and grow. He's going to have time to, maybe make a few staff changes. If he whiffs on a few guys, if he whiffs on the quarterback, is not going to derail him early, since he's going to have a thicker leash than what the rest of these head coaching hires are going to have, since he is taking over a situation that is probably the worst of the bunch of the jobs that were open, in a situation that everybody knows is going to take a little bit of time. The Dolphins were even considering somewhat bringing back Mike McDaniel for a few more years, since they know that the previous GM already messed up. Mike McDaniel wasn't really the guy who wanted Tua. He inherited Tua when he first got the job. And it was kind of shocking that they just changed their mind at the last second to just go in a different direction. Jeff Hafley, he could work. The AFC East, I don't think that it's not for the taking. The Patriots made it to Super Bowl this year, but their roster still has a lot of holes. The Buffalo Bills, with the hiring of Joe Brady, high risk, high reward. The New York Jets, they still are the New York Jets, so at least you'll be better than them. As long as the Jets are in the AFC East, it's hard to see Jeff Hafley being worse than Aaron Glenn. So I don't hate this hire. I think that it was probably the best hire that they could have made, since this job was very unattractive. You got to get rid of Tua. You got to eat a lot of dead cap hit. You're going to be forced to rebuild for the next 3 years. You're not going to be that competitive from a talent standpoint compared to the contemporaries in your division. Jeff Hafley, there's a solid chance that this ends up being a pretty good move hiring him.